Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Luke with Luke F1 Fantasy with my final thoughts video following sprint qualifying that happened earlier today. And we have all sorts of questions that need to be answered this week. We have who is our best 2x driver, what is our best combination of 2A drivers, who is going to be the second constructor that we put into our team. We may even be looking at shifting on our B tier drivers to get the most optimum ones for budget and for points. And then we have the decision of whether we are going to play a chip. So we will remind you, though, that the team lock is just before the sprint race, which is going to be happening at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, which is my time zone here in Alberta, Canada, which will be 6 p.m. UK time. So definitely make sure you check your local time zones for that and make sure you get your team locked in. But yeah, I have the sprint results up on screen here, as you can see. And continuing his reign of form, Max Verstappen has taken pole, quickly followed by Lando and Oscar. Oscar trailing a little bit further behind Lando this weekend, especially at the end of Q3, but still McLarens are looking super fast. Nico Hülkenberg has looked fast in the Sauber all week and showing up a fourth place. Russell in fifth, Alonso sixth, Sainz in seventh. The Ferraris, Lewis and Charles 8 and 10. So not a great day for Ferrari. Antonelli in 11th with Mercedes. So kind of an iffy day for Mercedes. Some good things with George, some Kimi kind of getting used to things there. So, but we know how good Kimi typically is outside of Europe. So maybe Mercedes continue to look to improve things over the weekend. Hadjar and the Racing Bulls, some power issues again at Racing Bulls. So 12th, Gasly, interestingly enough, jumping into 13th in the Alpine, which as a Gasly owner, seeing him that high qualify with, it's kind of leaving me into a little bit of a pickle as to whether I keep Gasly in my team this week. And then typical at the bottom here, we have Stroll, Lawson, Behrman, Colapinto, Yuki, Ocon, and Bortoletto. There we go. That is our lineup for the sprint. We do have the benefit of looking at the sprint qualifying grid before we lock in our team. So that's what we are left with. So there's some interesting things to break down here. So first question, as we talked about at the top of the video, is who's going to be our best 2x driver. So really from this list, I mean, it's hard to bet against Max. He's on a rich vein of form. The Red Bull car is looking just as fast as the McLaren. I think Max is a very strong candidate for a 2x at this time, should your budget allow. Oscar and George Russell would be pretty much neck and neck for me as the next 2x driver that you could look at. Depending on where your teams are at the moment, some people jumped into George Russell builds last week. I stayed with the Oscar build. So I had the decision to make as to whether to jump off one or the other and sort of have them as my sort of second driver. But from a 2x perspective, I probably would say if it's your 2x and it's your main driver, I think really your main choices at this point is just Max and Oscar. For those of you that are operating George as your solo 2x, I think that's an okay move depending on the rest of your lineup, but not having any Max, not having any McLaren, that would be purely just a budget issue that would probably lead you to that. So 2x would be Max and Oscar for me. Combination of 2A drivers, I think this is where there will be a little bit of variability. I think Max, again, sort of should stay as one the constant in that combination, should you be able to afford it, with an Oscar or a George, depending on where your lineup and your budgets are as well. Best second constructor, well, I think Mercedes are still the one to beat for me. Like George is fifth, yeah, Antonelli's 11th. He's kind of in a bit of he's not in the points. He's a few points away. He's got some strong cars in front of him. Antonelli's ability to overtake and beat these guys on track is going to be tough. So I'm expecting Mercedes, even though George is in fifth, I see George being able to maybe jump into fourth with Nico Hülkenberg. Maybe he takes advantage of some issues happening at the top of the order with Lando and Oscar, that kind of battle happening on. So there's a little bit of ceiling for George to gain some extra positions and go up. Again, in sprint qualifying, the sprint qualifying fantasy point, or the sprint fantasy points you get, is not as much as a premium as the race. So you do have to look at this and kind of go, how much are we basing our choices based on sprint race, which doesn't give you as much points as the races does. So, but I, ultimately just say that there is some ceiling for George still to reach this week. And so, yeah, I think those are the reasons why I still sort of give Mercedes an edge. I mean, Ferrari, we're just not really looking there at all this week. Yes, of course, they could turn things around, but to make that decision to move into a Ferrari, especially for me to transfer Ferrari in, would be a very much a no. If you have Ferrari, I think you should be getting off Ferrari. I think there's a much more optimal plays, especially with Mercedes, especially even a Red Bull. You can save a bit of money just by dropping that into a Red Bull. Now, who are the best B tier drivers? Well, I think the ones that are the most obvious to start with is obviously Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz, both from a budget perspective this week and from a points perspective from what we've seen so far. They are looking like probably the two most strongest B tier assets you can have currently. Picking the third one, especially for me, I have a decision like I've got between Bortoleto and Gasly, and that's what I was sort of coming to earlier with Bortoleto now starting from the back of the grid. And we know that the Sauber has some pace on the fact that what Hülkenberg is doing in his car. And there are some cars in front of Bortoleto that he can overcome and beat. Like both Alpines are there, both Hazes are there. Yes, their race pace isn't as great in the kick. But worst case scenario, they get a couple places here in the sprint. Maybe they qualify again poorly tomorrow. But again, they're starting from the back of the grid in the race as well. And over the course of the race, things can happen. So, there is a path where I may just keep Bortoleto in my team, especially when I look at Gasly being 13th. If he loses 3 or 4 spots in this sprint, he could be sort of going into qualifying already on minus points, really. And then I kind of consider myself, well, he does need 2 to get, is it 2 points to see, or no, still needs 6 points to see a 0.2 increase. So if he's starting like at minus 0.1, minus 0.2, he's now needing like 8 points over the qualifying and the race. I mean, the Alpines aren't getting out of Q1, so he's not at any chance of getting any points himself in qualifying. And is he going to score close to 8 points just 8 points just in the race? I'm not too sure that can happen. So now I'm more kind of looking at it from a position of maybe looking at taking Gasly out and keeping Bortoleto. Now, there are a couple B tier interesting plays if you are on a lower budget and if you are just completely kicking budget building to the side now and you're looking for alternatives to try and get some points in your mini leagues and things like that, then Antonelli, I still could look at being someone that you could keep. Yes, it's 11th, so may not be the points potential in the sprint race itself. But if Mercedes just continue to improve, learn more about the car, and then he can improve over qualifying in the race, then I think Antonelli is still a good shout for, especially lower budgets, not those of you that are not quite on the 4A builds. Albon, again, another one that we probably wouldn't be looking at from the budget building perspective because he needs such a big 16-pointer to see any sort of price increase. But seeing where Albon has qualified in the sprint qualifying, again, Williams do look strong over the course of the weekend, that Albon will be someone that, again, from a differential perspective, not quite as expensive as an Antonelli, but you may be looking at an Albon from a points perspective as well. All right, so here we go. Here are my team to start with. 2 transfers to make. So ultimately, I can't really do anything with my team at this moment. I got 0.6 million left in the bank. So the only one transfer move that I can really make, as we spoke about at the start of the week, was taking Bortoleto out, and then that leading us to a position where we can get Fernando Alonso in. It doesn't quite want to let me do it this way. It wants me to do Fernando Alonso first, and then Gasly. So that's my move. That's my move that I would have been happy with if I was happy to keep Oscar, which I'm still umming and ahhing whether I want to do that. But that was sort of where we're going to start off with. Now, coming back to Oscar and Russell now. Oscar's qualified 3rd, Russell's 5th. Like I said, I do see Russell having the ability to go up. Can Oscar overtake Lando and Max? I mean, certainly he can do. Will it happen? We're not too sure, especially with the form that Piastri is kind of showing recently. But in a situation where we kind of go back to, okay, what if I want to keep Bortoletto in my team and see if there is some upside play to have with his overtake points? Then a two transfer move that I could look to do would be to I think Max is going to be a staple in my team. So looking at maybe taking out Oscar and dropping down into George Russell, which frees up some funds, which then means I had the flexibility to take out Gasly, try to avoid some of those minus points that he may get from dropping down. I'm not sure if he can get those back. And putting in Fernando Alonso, which gets me into the budget building points perspective again. So two transfers, it gets me some budget building in Russell. I do probably still see Piastri scoring more points than Russell over the course of this weekend. However, the chance, I don't think it's going to be by much. 5-ish points, maybe 8 points potentially. But also with the budget increase, Russell's going to go up 0.3, Piastri's going to go down 0.3. So, that's looking at ultimately a 0.6 million difference, which I'd probably take that to give up 5 points. Then we get an extra 0.6 million. I kind of like that idea. Plus, it also benefits me from getting away from a Gasly and an Alpine build and sort of massively upgrades the Gasly into Alonso for really not that much more price difference. The one downside of this is I don't think this is a type of team that I would look to play the 3x chip on the autopilot chip on going into the weekend. Russell's not really showing enough. I do think Mercedes do improve over the course of the weekend, and I do think Russell's in hot form. So definitely I'm interested in sort of making this switch to put Russell in order to allow my team to get Alonso in as well. Like I said, I'm not really thinking about moving my second constructor at this moment in time, and I'm liking this setup here. Like I said, if I really felt like if I was strong enough about keeping Piastri, then really that move only really allows me to get the Alonso in for Bortoletto, which feels maybe at this point more of a sideways move, apart from the fact that Alonso has that almost guarantee to get the price increase. But again, Gasly, I think he's just going to be a bit of a thorn in my side. And I've been kind of preaching for a while that if I can get off Alpine, I'm happy with it, as long as I'm not penalizing my team too much. And so downgrade from a Piastri to a Russell, I say downgrade only by value, judging on level performance, points potential. It's probably more of a coin flip, you could say, with Oscar probably having more of a, maybe a slightly more chance to getting more of a higher points from a race win and fastest lap and things like that. So a 3x for this type of team, that would be a team I'd be okay taking the 3x with, even though I've got Gasly in there. I think putting the 3x, 2x on Verstappen Piastri is a strong build. Is it the most? Will it be the most optimum this year? It's tough to say. There's Brazil and Qatar still coming up, so there is opportunities to use it later on. So I'm not convinced I'm going to use it, but I think this would be a strong enough team to use it on. Now, just having a little bit of fun, and what else could we do? Well, like I said, I talked to you a little bit about what would you do if you could drop your second constructor. And again, in the most perfect scenario where Hülkenberg holds on to his fourth, Bortoletto gets 5 to 8 overtakes, he finishes like 12th, he's gotten 10ish points in a sprint, then that puts Kick on a position where if they have sort of similar performances in qualifying and race, and by that I mean, even if Hülkenberg doesn't do great in qualifying for the race, and if he finishes in the sort of the bottom, the bottom 5 places, and Bortoletto's there, do we have two cars that maybe could both be overtaking cars and both could sort of be adding up points that way? Do we think the Kick is any faster than really significantly faster than any of those teams that are typically down there? Probably not, but there has been history of them having strong overtakes. If you are going down this route, though, what is kind of interesting is that it does open up sort of a triple A driver type of build, and I can just about afford this with a Verstappen, Piastri, and Russell build. So it seems pretty fun. It does rely a lot on Max has got to win, so Lando doesn't win or Oscar doesn't win because I avoid the 2x on it. But it really depends on Bortoletto being the one that's sort of bringing up the floor of this kick Sauber team, which with their overtake points, they would look to sort of challenge maybe, you know, Ferrari or Mercedes as being sort of the third best constructor this week. But again, a lot has to go right. We have multiple sessions. So it is kind of fun to look at it on paper. I don't quite think I'm going that way. But this would kind of also open up potentially some sort of like autopilot type of thing as well. If you ever have sort of heebie-jeebies about what is the front three going to be doing, battling for positions, and does it help to sort of have an autopilot on a sprint weekend here? There is another one. Obviously, you can kind of go to a Williams type of build if you don't have quite those funds as well. You want to maximize. So, Williams have got 2 cars in the top 10. So, this is also again a type of build that maybe you're looking at. With my type of budget, you can even fit a Kimi Antonelli in here too. So a little bit of risky plays. They are differentials. If your transfers are sort of leading you down this way, I would understand sort of getting to this type of position. But that's sort of too much sort of getting away from where I want my team to eventually be. So yeah, I see some optimum build. There's probably a few sort of different optimum builds this weekend. But yeah, going into the deadline tomorrow, we should be able to get some Ritter models and projections. Make sure you check out everyone's videos this weekend. There's lots of deadline streams happening. So feel free to go check out the guys and their channels there. Otherwise, good luck for this weekend, and we will catch you on the other side of the Grand Prix.